بسم الله الصلاة والسلام على رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. اللهم إنا نسألك علما نافعا ونعوذ بك من علم لا ينفع وبعد. We begin as always by praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and sending salawat upon Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Let's take a moment to thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for his abundance of favors that he gives us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has provided us with a community. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has provided us with guidance. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has provided us each other in this room. Even to have young leaders in the community like the volunteers and the organizers of this event to put something like this together is a blessing in and of itself. And so we thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for all of these favors and the favor of having each and every one of us here. Because every single person to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the very beginnings of Islam was so dear and near to him. Today we think 2 billion people, and we sometimes lose sight of that fact or that reality. That everyone that comes with La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah is so valuable. So we thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for that. I've been asked to speak about Abdul Qadir al-Jazairi in the context in light of what's going on today. I can't do justice. To men like this, like him, how can I? But I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as I started, Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri. Really, wa yassir li amri. Wahlul uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. Oh Allah, make this task easy for me. Untie the knots in my tongue and allow me to say that which the people can understand. And in fact, I add, oh Allah, allow me to say that which pleases you and brings you near and dear to us. Abdul Qadir al-Jazairi, let's start with when he was born. That's how we usually introduce people, right? 1807. How many years back is that? You guys are at tech, you guys know math. Come on, how many years back is that? How many years? 217? No? Let's do the math. 1807 plus 200, that's 2007, plus 16. So 216. Yeah? We're good? What? Yalla, let's move on. You guys don't seem to like math as much as I thought you would like. But he was born into a small village in Algeria, the name of which I still don't know how to pronounce because in English, Guettana. In Arabic, there's a qaf. So I'm wondering, is it like the Masri qaf, Guettana? Or is it Guettana? Who knows? I've tried reaching out to my Algerian friends, but they haven't responded to me. It's like they left me in the wind. But alhamdulillah, no problem. I still love them. So he was born into this small village in Algeria. And it's important to mention which village he was born into because his grandfather, Abdul Qadir al-Jazairi, his grandfather's name was Mustafa ibn Muhammad. Mustafa ibn Muhammad, he traveled. You know, in the past, when you would go for Hajj, it wasn't just going for Hajj. You would make multiple stops on the way and on the way back, especially if you lived further away from the place, from Mecca and Medina. And so his grandfather, on his way to Hajj, he stopped and he met with the scholars of Baghdad, and he learned or he relearned the spiritual and the discipline of spiritual and character development according to Abdul Qadir al-Jilani. Another thing that we might have lost touch with is maybe you'll know if you talk to your grandparents or your great-grandparents, everyone had a teacher that would help them in the discipline of character development, that would help them in the discipline of spiritual development. And somehow, some way along the road, we started to look down on this discipline. But this was a reality across the world. And you had different masters of the self that would teach that discipline. And this is something I lament today because we're so fixated. We feel like knowledge is so accessible. You just go on YouTube, you just open up a PDF, and you have everything you need. But none of those YouTube videos and none of those PDFs will ever correct you on your flaws in your character. It will never catch you and teach you the things you need to learn. You will only get whatever you're seeking out. You'll only find the sweetness, you'll never taste the bitter. But we need the bitter just as much as we need the sweet. In the past, our greats, they would seek out the bitter. They would seek out those scholars that can point out their flaws, that can point out their mistakes. And they would sit with them and they would spend time with them. And so the grandfather of Abdul Qadir al-Jazairi, not Abdul Qadir Jilani, but Abdul Qadir al-Jazairi, our main protagonist for the night, his grandfather, he went and he studied and he spent some time, and then he brought that discipline back to his village. Within 2 generations, that village became a hub for students of knowledge, for traveling scholars, and for travelers in general to come and stop by to develop the self. And so Mustafa ibn Muhammad's son, Muhyiddin, he took on his father's role and then increased the works and developed the community even further. It is in that environment that Abdul Qadir al-Jazairi was born in 1807. Keep that in mind. And you can see the love they had for Abdul Qadir al-Jilani because they're naming their grandson Abdul Qadir, and now we know him as al-Jazairi from Algeria. This is the inheritance of the Prophet that we talk about. That the prophets are the inheritors of the scholars are the inheritors of the Prophet. They take something and they continue to pass it down. And then every once in a while in history, you find those individuals. They're living amongst you and they show you a manifestation of the prophetic way. And you just wonder, how can such a beautiful individual with such characters exist? Until you stick around and then their flaws come out. That's human beings. No one's perfect. So Abdul Qadir al-Jazairi, he was born into this scholarly family and he learned from his father. That was the first starting point. His education was from Muhyiddin and he studied under his father and he learned everything his father had to teach him. Then he moved on and he studied under Qadi Ahmed ibn Tahir. Qadi Ahmed ibn Tahir, the historians, they say, he was said to be one of the best educated men in Algeria. So he learned the classical traditional sciences from the Qadi, but on top of that, he learned other sciences as well, such as astronomy, mathematics, and geography. This is very important because now this is shaping Abdul Qadir al-Jazairi. At the age of 14, he's taken all of that. He's just 14 years old. He's already studied from his father. He's already studied and taken everything he could from Qadi Ahmed ibn Tahir. Now he's moving on and he's going to some of the elite schools in Iran. And there he's studying and learning with many of the elite families. This is important because later on, those same people that he grew up with in that school, he had an impact on them. And they became his supporters down the road. But the story continues. As he grows older, the time comes for him to go for Hajj. And recently, I went on an Umrah trip. It was the last week of December. It's very minor compared to Hajj, and it's nothing compared to what they used to do back then. But somehow, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a way, if you're really seeking to connect with Allah, to give you something to learn. That bitter taste that you need. This time when I went to Umrah, I learned that even after being a Muslim, I have to become a Muslim. He'll give you situations and scenarios you don't like at all, you don't want. And you'll do everything you can to try to change it. But then you finally realize that no, Allah has a different plan. And you just kind of let it go and allow Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to take control. Abdul Qadir al-Jazairi, in his Hajj trip, he had way more. It was months and months. He started his journey, he goes through Tunis, and he sees the society there, Islam is flourishing even more. Then he goes through Alexandria and Cairo in Egypt. Then from there, he goes to Mecca for Hajj. He stays in Mecca for a month to complete his Hajj rites, and then he comes back. Instead of going directly back to Egypt, he goes up north to Damascus. In Sham, he spends 4 months studying Bukhari, and then he spends time with Sheikh Khalid al-Naqshbandiyya, al-Mujaddiyya. Like I said, in the past, you had masters of the self, of character development. One methodology was the way of Abdul Qadir al-Jilani, the Qadiri method. Then you have the method of the Naqshbandi method. So he went, even though he already had a master in a methodology that he studied, he wanted to see a different perspective. Like we like to study comparative religion or comparative fiqh, he wanted to study comparative character development. And so he studies under this scholar for 4 months. And then he goes to Baghdad for 3 months. And he goes and visits the grave of Abdul Qadir al-Jilani. And he goes and he visits what was known at that time to be the greatest scholar of the Jilani methodology of character development and spirituality. And he spends time with him as well. He comes back with all of that knowledge, but before he comes back, he makes another stop for Hajj. He's already on this side of town, in Sham, in Baghdad. Why not? So he goes to Mecca for another Hajj. And there he meets with yet another scholar that was a master of the self. He met with Muhammad ibn Ali as-Sanusi. And he had the Sanusi methodology. He himself was such a master that he founded a methodology himself. So now Al-Jazairi has 3 masters under his belt that he studied under. Not some Joe Schmo, he studied with the greats. And so you can imagine what kind of character he must have been. To meet with him, to talk with him, to see how he held himself. And that haiba, that respect and honor, self-respect. It would have been amazing to meet a man like that. Then he goes back and he goes to Egypt. Abdul Qadir al-Jazairi wasn't just someone that was spiritual and just did ibadah 24/7. He was a man that was pragmatic and practical. And you'll see soon what I mean by that. On the way back, he stops in Egypt and he meets with Muhammad Ali, who was a man that was creating a lot of reform, political reform in Egypt. So he, Abdul Qadir al-Jazairi, and his father, Muhyiddin, they had an opportunity to sit and spend some time and learn. How are you shaping up your country in this time? Because colonization is taking place. There's this friction. Ottoman Empire is already on its back end, on its back foot. And the European world is coming and colonizing and attacking different areas. And the whole world is starting to shift and change. And so he's sitting, they get a chance to sit with Muhammad Ali to see what reforms he was bringing to the social setting. Now imagine a Hajj trip that teaches you all of that. He went to Hajj a follower, a man that's just responding and saying, Labbaik, Allahumma labbaik, I'm here, Ya Allah. And Allah sent him back saying, my slave, you have a mission. Go back and fulfill your mission. Go back and submit to my destiny for you. So now Abdul Qadir al-Jazairi finally makes it back home to Algeria. There was some friction between the Ottoman rulers or the governors in Algeria and the Algerians themselves. They didn't really have a healthy relationship, let's just put it like that. You know, it's always the Muslims that go behind Muslims' back, right? It's the Muslims that do the Muslims dirty, unfortunately. So there was some friction, but we'll leave the bad blood. That's all in the past. Now we're friends again, inshallah. So what they had to do, Muhyiddin and his son al-Jazairi, they had to kind of lay low. Because if they came back and they, were teaching people and causing crowds to come out, then the Ottoman governors, they might feel like, oh, are they going to revolt? Are they bringing people together for something malicious? And they were very scared of what could happen, what potential they might have. And so they laid low. But this act of staying quiet and kind of staying to themselves and just worshiping even more and increasing their knowledge even more in those 2 years just increased the people's love for them even more. Because that family was already known to be a pious family. That family was already known to give wise words of encouragement, wise words of guidance. That family was already known for all of this. But now they come after that huge, amazing journey and they go back to themselves and they turn back to themselves, not focusing on the people like that. So they just fell in love even more. After 2 years, they were kind of forced out of their bubble because now the French, they come and they attack, and the Ottoman governors, they're officially gone. Not by the Algerians, by the French. And now the French are in town. Long story short, the Algerian people, because there's no proper rule and order, chaos erupts and anarchy erupts. And the elites in the society, they need that the chaos to be lifted. They need law and order back. They reach out to Morocco. Morocco sends some people, but that was short-lived. And then finally, it kind of came down to it. Muhyiddin and his son, their family, they needed to mobilize. It was high time to bring the community back. It was high time to bring all of the rifts, all of the tribes that are fighting over tiny, tiny things, bring them together and fight the colonizers. Muhyiddin is a man that is old by this time. And Abdul Qadir al-Jazairi, he's in his late 20s. 1828, so 1830. He's 23, 24. Not late 20s, early 20s. His father, Muhyiddin, tells the people that are with him, look, I'm old. My son, he will be in the front lines. He will be the one to lead. The son was already known to have piety. The son was already known to have wisdom. The son was already known to have that spiritual knowledge. But now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was going to bring out what was already within him, the bravery. And so Abdul Qadir al-Jazairi, with his wisdom and his piety, he leads the people and he fights back the French. And he manages not just to fight back the French, but in fact continuously unite more and more of the Algerian population. He focused on that first before even fighting. And more than 2/3 of Algeria had come together under his leadership. And he fought the French to such an extent, the French felt forced to make a deal in truce with Abdul Qadir al-Jazairi. This man from a small village, with the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the most beautiful thing that he did was not his fight against the French. He was able to bring a tribal society together under the banner of La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. The whole time that he fought, he continued to remind the people, look, I just want to unite the Muslims and bring the Sharia. I just want to unite the Muslims and push away those that are invading our lands. This is for Allah. This is a noble cause. There's no hidden agenda. It's not for me. I don't care for the power. And if he was a scam artist, he would have been outed very quickly. But underpinning all of the qualities that I mentioned, his piety, his wisdom, his spiritual knowledge, and now his bravery, underpinning all of that, and this is the most important thing, was his sincerity. That's why if I had to give this talk a title, it would be Abdul Qadir al-Jazairi, Sincerity in Action. Abdul Qadir al-Jazairi, from here the story really begins. When the French invade and he starts to unite the people of Algeria and fight, So many amazing things happen. And we don't have time to go into it. But I'm going to pick 3 occasions, 1 or 2 of them that happened in Algeria, 1 of them that happened post Algeria, because eventually, though he united the people, though he fought the French and forced them into a truce, eventually Allah's qadr took over and he had to surrender himself. But let's start with, out of 3, point number 1. One of the things that made him a legend and shows his sincerity is how he treated the French prisoners. The French, when they took the Muslim prisoners, they treated them worse than animals, with utmost violence. It reminds you of what's happening today. There's no heart for our Ghazan brothers and sisters. But Abdul Qadir al-Jazairi, he treated the prisoners that they captured with utmost respect, according to the way that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam taught. In fact, there was a moment when Abdul Qadir al-Jazairi, he saw that they don't have enough food to feed the prisoners, so he said, let the prisoners go because we can't fulfill their rights. He said, let the prisoners go because we can't fulfill their rights, even though they did so much worse to the Muslims. That was one of the points that made him a legend. But that's just the beginning. That's just the beginning. From his own army, the people were saying, they do so much worse to us. Let us get back a little bit. Let's take them, let's not just take them as captives. Let's torture them as well. And Abdul Qadir al-Jazairi said the famous words, they are not our teachers. They are not our teachers. Only a man that is truly sincere to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would be able to see in that moment, my own people are coming to me and saying, we have to torture them back. We have to show revenge. And his sincerity comes out, and as clear as day, he's able to say, they are not our teachers. How do you think of that? It's not something that's scripted. It's something that Allah places in the heart. Then another moment, because of time, we'll focus on 2. Another moment was after he was exiled, when the French overtook, and Abdul Qadir al-Jazairi had to eventually surrender. They exiled him, and he ended up in a community up north, Sham, perhaps northeast of Sham. And in that community, there were Christians that were being persecuted by Muslims. It was kind of like a reverse of the script. And Abdul Qadir al-Jazairi, his name had gone far and wide by that point. And he single-handedly stood up for the Christians this time. And he's telling the Muslims, stop, this is not right what you're doing. They barked back and said, you were fighting the Christians with the French, you were fighting the Christians in Algeria. He said, I was fighting people that were invading. You are fighting people that are living amongst you. And what was historians today, whether they're Muslim or not, they all attest to this. That was a genocide waiting to happen. Abdul Qadir al-Jazairi stopped it single-handedly. That's sincerity in action. That's being able to see the truth for what it is and then standing up for it, even when it's against the self. My brothers and sisters, those are the timeless qualities. The piety, the wisdom, the spiritual knowledge, the bravery, all under, the foundation of all of that being sincerity. That is what we need today. That is what we should seek out today. If you want to stand up and be a leader, this is what you need. If you are seeking for someone to support, this is what you should look for. And today, there's no one that has these qualities more than our Ghazan brothers and sisters in Palestine. You see the piety coming out. You see the spiritual knowledge and the wisdom and the love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, all underpinned by sincerity, it's coming out as broad as the sun today. Look at Wa'il Dahdu. Lost his wife, lost his son. He continues to cover what's going on. It doesn't stop him. He loses another son. And that son of his was even more dear to him and was a journalist just like him. Continues. How do you continue in that situation? How do you continue to do your job unless it's something bigger than just a job? And you look at Uncle Khalid Nabhan, lost his granddaughter and grandson, the soul of my soul. You know what he's doing? He's raising funds so that he can give toys to other children in Gaza to bring a smile on their faces. And you find videos of him uplifting families that are broken and torn apart because they've lost their grandchildren, they've lost their sons and daughters. How do you do that unless there's sincerity there? And he's quoted. You'll find Uncle Khalid saying, "Inna ma'al usri yusra." Inna ma'al usri yusra. That's the wisdom. That's the spiritual knowledge. And that's the sincerity coming into action. They are our leaders. If they tell me, stop drinking Coke, sami'na wa ata'ana, I will stop. If they tell me, keep advocating for our cause, I will keep advocating for their cause. Whatever they say, I'm right behind them. Because I sure am not a leader. I'm just a follower. And today, even in the West, we find our scholars and learned speaking boldly and loudly. And when you hear them, you feel, I want to be behind them. And you can mention many, many names. But an icon, our Sheikh Omar Sulaiman, when you hear him speak, he doesn't shy away and mince his words. When you hear political analysts that are uplifting the ummah and bringing them together to think, like Sami Hamdi, you can't help but want to hear more and get behind his ideas. But behind every Dahdu and behind every Sheikh Sulaiman, there's thousands of voices that are not named. How many journalists are killed, have been killed so far? More than 100. While Dahdu is not alone. How many scholars, if I asked you, are speaking up about Gaza and Palestine? Sheikh Omar Sulaiman is not alone. We are the voices that amplify theirs. If they are the sun, we are the rays. It's high time for us to continue to support however we can. Every single penny that you send, there's khair and benefit. Every single post that you post and repost and like and tweet and share, there's khair. Every single event that you join, there's khair. Every single time you raise your hands and make dua, there's khair. If under that, there's sincerity. So remember this, in this event that was called Rays of Hope, Palestine, you are the rays of hope. And don't look at the numbers, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَكَمْ مِنْ فِئَةٍ قَلِيلَةٍ غَلَبَتْ فِئَةً كَثِيرَةً بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ وَاللَّهُ مَعَ الصَّابِرِينَ. And how many are the groups that are small, but they've overcome larger numbers by the permission of Allah. And know that Allah is with those who are willing to wait it out. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.